Hello, everyone. Welcome to the 11th episode of the Dose of Desi. Today is Saturday, July 16th, and we have another fascinating guest lined up for today.
What's up, everyone? Hudson here. It's been a crazy week, super busy, but it's things like this podcast that really make it fun and exciting. And I'm extra excited about our special guest, who is currently the Senior Director of Global Licensing and Business Development for Funko. But I've known him from a prior role, and I've had the pleasure of chatting with him over the years. I'd like to welcome Jason Bischoff to the podcast. Welcome, Jason.
Hello,
Jason.
humans. Thank you so much for this opportunity. It's cool to hang out.
Yeah, absolutely. Super excited to chat with you, and to everybody watching as well. Make sure you share your thoughts, comments, and questions in the chat throughout the podcast as well. Would love to hear from everyone as well.
That's right. And I guess to start off with Jason, I know we kind of already were talking about the introductory stuff, but I'd love to hear more about you. And well, first, let's start off with how did you meet Hassan, and how did you get in touch with each other?
Oh, yeah. Well, look, that's not that complicated, which, even though today I'm at Funko, I've been here about 3 years. Prior to this role, I was with Power Rangers for about 3.5 years. We can kind of get into the hows and whys later. But, as part of that, I'd been a huge Ranger fan for many, many years. And I had gotten to know a wealth of the community just in my own fandom. And so when I was inside, so to speak, I couldn't help but try and connect with the broader fandom on the outside. At the time, we were running a program called Ranger Nation. We were really trying to make it very conversational, and it was just a cool opportunity to get to know some of the folks that I'd only known by screen name for many years, right? So Hassan was one of those people. And we had a handful of interactions between conventions, and I think we attended the 2016 film premiere together. So we just had we've got to know each other kind of casually through the years, and then after I exited that role, it became more of a, hey, I'm playing Fortnite. You want to play Fortnite with me? And then here we are, right? So it's cool to kind of make these kinds of friends, right? Anyway, that's the long and the short.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's been fun just kind of keeping up over the years, and like you said, playing Fortnite. I feel like that's how I've just kept up with a lot of friends over the years as well, is through Fortnite. But between New York Toy Fair, I think, is one thing where I saw you at, and then obviously the movie premiere, which I have memorialized on the wall there, of course, is a very special memory. But
otherwise, it's a different picture. But for tonight, you made the swap, and I appreciate that effort.
No, it's been forever up there. It is truly a special moment. Absolutely. But yeah, really, we wanted to start off just kind of getting to know you a little bit, and where you're at, a little bit of your background, just get to know who Jason Bischoff is.
Oh gosh. Okay. Well, look, I have no shame in saying it. I'm a bit of a professional weirdo. I've been in the broader entertainment kind of licensing space the better part of 17 years. I started at Playmates Toys in 2004, just having come out of school. I mean, at the time, I wanted to be a Disney Imagineer. If you know what those are, great. If you don't, it's basically like it's a broad and diverse group of people that make most of what you see in the parks today. So like the rides and attractions and shows, it's a broad range of folks that do everything from writing to design to architecture, etc. So I wanted to do that. Brokenhearted to learn that they only took architecture and engineering majors. I was an anthropology and writing major, so it was very unlikely, at least at that time. Jumped into toys, which was a natural extension because I had been into toys and comics basically the entirety of my life. Was very privileged essentially overnight to go from random college guy to working on Ninja Turtles and Disney Princess and Simpsons and all that cool stuff. Was there for about 3.5 years, made the jump to Blizzard. If you know Blizzard, that's World of Warcraft, StarCraft, Diablo, Overwatch. Was there for the better part of a decade, helped construct from the ground floor most of what the license program was there, doing many of the in-house production opportunities as well, which I have some pictures I can maybe show you later. And then really was kind of on the forefront or the frontier, if you will, of video game licensing, because at the time, now it's kind of hard to think about it in such a way, but at the time, video games and entertainment, there was a massive chasm there as to what the expectations were business-wise. So, the old school didn't necessarily see video games as an opportunity in traditional consumer products. That space was primarily reserved for television and theatrical, right? Video games was kind of this nice extension of consumer products, not necessarily a driver of content. We helped flip the script a little bit at that time, especially with World of Warcraft having, I think, in its heyday, 15 million subscribers monthly. So we had a lot of cool opportunities to open some doors there. So I did that for, like I said, about a decade, made the jump to Saban Brands for 2.5 years or so, worked on Power Rangers, helped open some opportunities there for the consumer product side of the business. I worked on a handful of creative initiatives as well. So helping dial in what became the comic series, which is now kind of legendary unto itself and a backbone of much of what's driving the lore these days. Got to influence some of the show stuff and ultimately where the show went, and then helped oversee the transition to Hasbro for about a year, and then made the jump to Funko. So that's kind of me, right? I've been a little bit of business hat, a little bit of creative hat, really whatever it takes to get the job done. And honestly, it's been the wildest and goofiest of experiences. And I'm just very grateful every single day that I get to do what I do.
Out of all those experiences that you mentioned, which one was, I guess, like most eye-opening or most interesting in your eyes? Like, what was it that, you enjoyed about it?
Sure. Look, I'm just going to say it plain. Every single opportunity has afforded me a degree of visibility and privilege that, I really shouldn't have been there. Like, let's be real. Like, some of the things I've been able to do are once in a lifetime. And the fact that I've had a couple of those, that's a lot to be grateful for. Every opportunity has given me something else. I will tell you, in my current role, when I started here in Funko about 3 years ago, I thought I knew it all, what this industry had to offer. Man, was I wrong. This has been the most wondrous of humbling and learning conducive experiences of my life. These days, I oversee all of our key accounts, which is, your Disney, Marvel, Lucas's, your Warner Brothers, Blizzard, my old stomping ground there. And that kind of visibility is very eye-opening, to your point, right? I've also had to learn entire new toolkits to do the kinds of things that we do here at Funko. It's all about breaking red tape and finding new ways of exploring different categories through the lens of stylization, or maybe just some of the ambitions that we have to literally and figuratively take over this piece of the world. So yeah, it's just, I would say Funko has probably been the most charging and the most challenging.
Nice. Now, you said, you went to school and to be a writer, or that was part of it, right? How has that been a part of these roles? And do you feel like that's still, that background has still been influencing your work to this day?
Yeah, 100%. So for me, when I was in school, a lot of it was kind of figuring myself out and where I wanted to go. I do remember taking a writing for children and teens class that revolutionized kind of my understanding, my nomos, who I was, because I walked into that class and knew instantaneously that this is what I wanted to do. I was that guy after the first assignment who showed up with a 45-minute presentation on the world and the characters and the, whatever it was. And nobody wanted to go after me because they really had only come up with like a sketch of something. So I was sort of frantically speaking from the podium, trying to get every idea out, supercharged, just like pumped. And I knew that was very indicative of like my desire to express in that way for this audience. So I was a writing major and also an anthropology major. And I know that these things may not feel like they are necessarily related, but I'll just kind of tell it to you very simply, which is like anthropology, ancient or current, is really just the understanding and study of people behaviorally, right? Like, why is a society shaped in the way that it is? Why is job specialization shaped in the way that it is? What are the raw elements that create these kinds of cultures? And then in some cases, subcultures. Like, fandom is a subculture, right? Batman is a subculture of a subculture, right? And what drives these things. And so once you start to understand the compositional elements that make up an audience, if you will, writing is really just, you can kind of use these things in tandem with one another. And you can write for a very specific audience if you understand what composes that audience or who composes that audience, right? So these things have served me infinitely over my career, right? Because I've been able to some extent, get a clear idea out. I don't know if that's happening today. I'm not going to claim otherwise, but really, it's been it's been a treasure trove of skills, because every single job that I've had has required me to understand the broader culture internally and externally. And then really come up with creative solutions on the spot. And so when you're like writing, for example, at least if you're creative writing, you have to literally put yourself into somebody's shoes in order to write to a degree authentically, right? To understand what's compelling these characters or what's driving these characters. And so for me, whether it's like the social engineering component of trying to build something cool into a campaign and sell it to the world, it still really starts with the fan. It really starts with like my natural love of something, or understanding what drives a person's natural love of something. And then you can start to kind of build on top of that. But it really starts with that sympathy, right? That clear love of something.
Nice.
That's awesome. Yeah, it sounds like you really put a lot of different hats on throughout your career, throughout your life. That's great to hear. What's one of the hardest and most challenging things about working in this industry?
Gads. Like I think right now it's a very interesting time. There are a wealth of global logistics issues that people may or may not be aware of that are entirely challenging everything that we know and understand, like the basics. Yeah. If you buy something on X date, you expect it to ship by X date, and then it'll arrive on shelves on another date. That does not exist right now, for a variety of reasons. Prices are all over the place based on raw material prices being all over the place. Factories are on or off depending on who's available. And of course, that really starts with, the health and protection of those folks. So it's been a veritable switchboard of challenges and just trying to find a new solution every single day. The only other thing that I would kind of flag, taking that stuff aside for a second, if we're just talking about a normative state, for me, it would be, sometimes it can get challenging to navigate personalities. Entertainment is rife with all sorts of different folks, right? People that totally get it and are cool and are easy to work with, and the opposite, right? So sometimes it's a bit of a juggling game, but that's my job. Literally, it's my job, and it's also, it can be challenging in the way that like invigorates you every day to know that you have to play that kind of a switchboard as well.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. I mean, that was actually really ties into like the next, question I was going to ask about, is the fact that you have in this industry that is very, creative. There are so many different types of people in there. It does require a lot of collaboration and trying to juggle all that. I mean, I know from like the flip side, on the fandom side, it's always just interesting, all the different personalities and how you can, mesh or not with other folks. And just from the business side of things, how that also plays out. It sounds like that's something you still have to navigate every day. Is that accurate?
Yeah. Just again, like I said earlier, just when I thought I had it figured out, the Funko system presents me with a new opportunity. And that's really kind of what I want to underline here is, some of those personalities are new opportunities to figure out how to, really engineer around those kinds of personalities in the future. And you'll fail. Let's be clear. You will fail. Some people are just destined to be a freight train against whatever it is you've got going on or trying to accomplish. But no, for the most part, I found a great degree of collaboration across the board, and just lots of strange opportunities to be in front of people you wouldn't expect, right?
Nice. That's really cool.
Hassan, do you want to go next?
Sure. So you talked about a variety of things, a variety of places that you worked. Is there something that you're working on, right now, perhaps at Funko, that you're really excited about that you can share?
That I can share.
Because I know there's a lot of things that I'm sure deals, a lot of things going on that probably can't speak about. But if there's something you've been working on or something recent, that you're excited about.
Oh, no, I can't share that. Shoot. I can share it in like 2 weeks after Comic-Con, but I can't share it right now. The kinds of things that I can't share that either. I'm so sorry, guys. Because we work so much so in the future, right? So like right now I'm working on closing 2023 and kind of early 24 stuff. So most of what's coming out right now are the kinds of things, I'll say this. I have been invited to do some stuff at San Diego next week that I'm personally very excited about. I'll have an opportunity to do some interviews on behalf of Funko with some very unexpected guests. Those guests have not been announced, so I can't announce the guests, but I'll be doing those on Thursday and Saturday. I believe some of them will be live streamed. I'll get to be a part of the Hall H panel, which will be great on Sunday. And then I'm going to be part of Fun Days, Funko Fun Days on Friday night. So those are things right now that are definitely kind of giving me life, right? There's a lot to do between now and Wednesday when I take the train down, but until then, that's definitely exciting me.
What are Funko Fun Days?
Oh, so Fun Days is kind of a special party that we host on top of Comic-Con. We do it on Friday night. My understanding is we've been doing it the better part of maybe 8 or more years. Or more, what am I saying? Probably over 10 years at this point. It is 5 hours of pure, unbridled fan chaos, right? So it's a separate ticketed event. We host a ballroom. We feed our friends and fans. We put on a show. And the show is a combination of games, prizing, unexpected celebrity guest stars, unexpected moments. Like it's ridiculous. I attended for the first time in 2017 when I was working at Saban, and entered that room not knowing what to expect, left that room with no voice whatsoever. And my ears were sort of ringing with how much like screaming and shouting and, audible madness had been going on for about 5 hours. I left supercharged. Because I had never seen that level of compressed and concentrated fandom. You're talking about like 5,000 people, all of a very similar mindset, just there to have the best time ever. And screaming and shouting for their friends and families to, do well on stage or whatever, because they get prizes too, right? The whole room is broken into roughly 4 sections. And so representatives will constantly come up from different tables and stuff. And when they compete, if that person wins, the whole section gets prized out. So you're talking about 1,500 people simultaneously. So there's just a lot of love and a lot of noise. And I guess the other way to say it too is for me, one thing I've really come to appreciate about Funko is we exist at the intersection of everyone's favorite stuff. And so being in a room like that, you have all the most diehard, loving fans that are wholly all about Alien or wholly all about Star Wars or whatever it might be. And so everybody's kind of got their story to tell. It's a very invigorating environment. I loved it. My wife left and was like, I am never coming back to this again. It was too much for her. Right. So that's what Fun Days is.
Gotcha.
Nice. That sounds really exciting. That's really fun.
It's a roller coaster. We'll say that it's a roller coaster.
Yeah, nice. So actually, one thing about Funko I did want to ask, because I saw that I didn't know that Funko makes these Funko Pop books, and there's one looks like Stranger Things, and there's a couple. So I know Funko Pop is the little collectibles. I know there's shirts that are available, but I didn't know they branched out into to books as well. So that's really cool. The different things out there. Is there anything you can talk about or share with that?
So most folks know Funko for Funko Pop, which is, sort of our bread and butter, if you will. independent of that, some of the bigger things that are happening these days, I mean, there are like Pop extensions. So you'd have things like Pop Rides, which is like a little vehicle, Pop Town, which comes with like a little diorama scene. We have Pop Moments, which are being sold in acrylic cases. Same thing with Pop Covers. So we're doing some of the most iconic scenes from film and TV, or some of the more famous comic covers or magazine covers of all time, with a pop stylized recreation, and it's all sonically sealed inside a ready display acrylic case. So that's like Pop, but like most people don't know or may not know about soda. So we have a whole line, separate stylization. It's sold in what looks like a soda can, but the can is as collectible as the figure itself. We've got things like, let's see here, Funko Games and Loungefly, which is kind of like the Gucci of geekdom, right? So it's all about those bags that are collectible in nature. So bags and accessories, right?
That's cool.
We've got a lot going on over here. But yeah, there's some outbound stuff as well, right? So I oversee all of our key accounts, and then I oversee outbound, which for us is doing things like little golden books, which you mentioned. We do a mobile game called Funko Pop Blitz, which is also outbound. And there's some other secrets I'm working on there, but I can't quite share those.
Actually,
Cool.
this would be a great time. I don't know if you have anything Funko related that you could share, but if you do, I think this
Sure.
would be like a great time to do that.
Sure.
Just because you mentioned all these things and got us excited. So
Yeah. Okay. Well, let me open one of these like top secret folders that I've got on my desktop here.
Okay.
Let's see. What do I want to share from Funko? Gads. What would people want to see? So, my job entails kind of I'll start here. So my job entails like, a lot of relationship management and mitigation of personalities and kind of keeping an eye on a very large dollar volume of our business. But really where it starts for me, at least, is it's about this, right? Like, this is what we do. It's all about fandom, right? So this is what I truly love about Funko, is it very much so is the company inside that it projects itself to be on the outside, right? And when I try and tell friends and family, what do we make or whatever, of course, we are absolutely a consumer products company. There's no question whatsoever. But in reality, to me, our primary export is culture. It is, that feeling that you share with other collectors of whatever, right? Like, again, we're kind of in between everybody's favorite stuff. And what we provide to everybody is the same size, scale, stylization, regardless of whatever your fandom is. So here's a picture of me. This is my first day in kindergarten on the left there, holding it's sort of a battle damage He-Man.
I was gonna say
figure, yeah. And then during the pandemic, I thought it'd be hilarious to recreate. I shouldn't say during. A year ago into the pandemic, I thought I'd recreate this photo in the exact same spot. So my mom still lives in my original childhood home. And I thought it'd be fun to kind of dress appropriately. So this to me is like elementally what Funko is, right? This is where it starts. In terms of other pictures, other things that I can show, let's see here. I don't know. Can you see my screen outright, or are you only seeing my picture?
Just the photo.
Just the photo.
Okay. All right.
And while you're pulling things up, I just grabbed a Funko Pop here too, because you got to have the collectibles around.
Oh yeah.
Well. So got a bunch in the other room. But
Mrs. Netterbottom.
Mrs. Nesbit.
Nesbit.
Yeah.
That's right, Mrs. Nesbit.
Yeah. Sorry,
it's
I'm not like
first Toy Story movie, Buzz Lightyear, when he was like
okay.
all dressed up from the kid. Yeah, I have the arm is like on the shelf too, or whatever. It's so great, all the different things they have. Yeah,
I recognize the He-Man figure in your picture, Jason, because I was also a big fan of He-Man growing up. So
big Motu guy. I'll be honest, like I was maybe just a pinch too young for Motu, but I loved like the way everything looked, and kind of the way the characters presented themselves. I very quickly transitioned from Motu into basically like Ninja Turtles in its time. Can you see my screen now? Is speaking of 80s properties?
I just see the He-Man photo still.
Just the photo.
Oh, He-Man photo still. Interesting. All right, let's go here. So here's another one. Speaking of 80s properties, My Pet Monster, if you remember My Pet Monster.
I don't, but it
No,
looks
that's
really
okay.
interesting.
So My Pet Monster was a toy in the 80s. I'm a bit of like I love spoopy stuff, not spooky, not scary, but spoopy, right? And My Pet Monster was like this toy from the 80s where he had kind of this monster aesthetic, and his whole thing was that he had these breakaway chains. The idea was it was like your monster best friend, I guess, if you will, right? He was a plush creature, I don't know, maybe 18 inches or so, and furry, and just really cool and weird, as many things were in kind of the late 80s, right? Kind of that gross out humor era. But what's interesting about My Pet Monster is when I came to Saban, was very surprised to learn that they had acquired the property several years before and really had done nothing with it. So I was part of the team that ultimately ended up licensing Rangers to Funko, and also including some of those properties. So lo and behold, about a year and a half or so later, when I had made the transition from Rangers to Funko, this figure ultimately came out, right? So it was like a full spectrum kind of deal. I signed the deal on the front end, and then, fast forward 12 months, I'm the guy buying it inside at Funko. So yeah, that's a little bit of what's going on at Funko. I might have something else. Let me see, take one more peek here. Speaking of kind of like that full circle moment, so this you might find interesting. This is actually a picture from Funko HQ. If you don't know what Funko HQ is, Funko owns and operates two primary stores. One is in Everett, Washington, which is our flagship. That's actually where we are headquartered. And then there's another in Hollywood, California, just down the street from me here. It's something in between theme parks and retail stores, right? It's Hollywood alone is 40,000 square feet and 125 characters on display and 14 themed areas. It's like a place to go. It's not just a store. So this is actually a photo, let's see here, from 2016, I want to say, 2017, where I had visited Funko to talk about, in Everett, Washington, to talk about, some shenanigans we were getting into at the time, aside from Pop, like top secret stuff that we were developing. And they had changed the marquee inside the store to say, obviously, welcome Saban. So now as I look back at these photos, it's just kind of weird. It's a bit full circle, right? Like playing for both teams and just grateful for the journey. So that's a little bit of Funko stuff.
Nice. That's really cool. I like how, that really just ties into, like you said, your journey through time, and how everything it's cool when things really intertwine and just come full circle. That's special.
And to that, I would offer this small bit of advice: regardless of what industry you're in, never burn a bridge unless you absolutely have to, because chances are you might need it in the future. So here we are.
Yeah.
It's also easy to burn bridges, but hard to build them.
Yeah, absolutely.
Anyway, I have a kind of a random question. What's the most unique or weird toy that you've ever seen?
Ever seen?
Ever worked on? Yeah.
Wow. Let me think. Let me let my subconscious kind of play with seen. In terms of worked on, I would say one of the most challenging projects I've ever had was for Overwatch. And we did a collector's edition for Overwatch that included a Soldier 76 statue in bronze in the box, right? And I have no shame telling you today, in retrospect, now 6 years removed, that was an impossible project. I had basically been given less than 5 months to produce hundreds of thousands of pieces on a statuesque piece that was composed of several hundred parts, and had almost no budget to do it. To give you a little bit of perspective, like the average toy, if you will, usually takes about 12 months from concept to fully realized, mass produced pieces, sometimes more than that. It's very rare for it to be less than. To have only done what we did in about 5 months was impossible. I still think about the very long and sleepless days that project required. Lots of international travel, lots of coordination. It was a full-time focus for me for the breadth of that time. And I remember things like being at the Thanksgiving dinner table with my family and getting a call and saying, "Hey, we need you in China tomorrow." So that to me is like, I don't know if that necessarily hits your definition of what you were looking for with your question, but that to me very much so stands out as like one of those very weird, very outside the box kinds of opportunities and moments in my life. In terms of like things that I've seen, I mean, a personal favorite of mine, if I think back to the Real Ghostbusters line, there was, I think he's called the Gooper Ghost. It's an orange ghost. It's technically a playset. And the way that he works is he's broken into two pieces. You stick your finger in his mouth, and when you collapse it, slime literally drops from the top of his mouth and out of his nostrils. It is vile in the coolest way possible, and I still think about the Gooper Ghost all the time.
All right, I have never heard of this. I've never seen this. Gotta check it out. Gonna have to look it up.
I'm gonna have to counter, guys. Like, this is not just my time. I would love to hear from the both of you too. Like, what stands out in your memories in terms of like very strange or weird or memorable toys?
Oh man, that's a good question. I mean, I think one for me, I guess not as much on the like weird side, but more just like it's just mind-blowing to me that this exists and that it's just such a standout, is the Roboson transforming Optimus Prime.
I've seen that in your channel.
Yeah, it's like remote control, but it's it fully transforms by itself and walks, and you can program it to do different things. Like it'll like literally do push-ups, and it'll like pretend to play like air guitar and all sorts of things. And it's just like mind-blowing to think, because I've been so used to growing up transforming all these toys and things myself, and now to have this thing really like come to life and do that. And it's fun because I'll do it and my son will watch, and so Optimus will like pretend to like box, and so then my son walks up and tries to do the same thing as well. And it's just a cool experience, and it's something that I'll just really cherish and is really unique, for sure.
Isn't that fascinating that like that exists in a box that costs, I don't even know, $300 or more?
Like 700, but
okay, but still, right? But it still exists in a box this size, and it can do all of those things. Where you think about like, audio animatronics, where they were 50 years ago, it was still compression systems and hydraulic systems and air systems. It's fascinating to me, like the almost the I'm losing my words here, but like
it's a consumer product. Like you can just buy it
yeah,
and have it in your house, right? Like that type of technology, right? That's insane.
Your answer is acceptable. Next.
I'm trying to think of something, and I'm blanking out here. So
that's okay.
But let's see. I know you mentioned, actually, you brought up China, right? And you mentioned international travel. I'd love to hear some more about your time traveling. I mean, what are some of the places that you've been to, either for your job or for pleasure, and some places that you really enjoyed?
Yeah, great question. I guess I would start with a challenge to anybody that's potentially watching now or in the future, which is, if you can travel, you absolutely should.
Second that.
And you should do so to the best of your ability, with an open heart towards whatever culture it is that you are visiting. And to not be like that person, that tourist that is attempting to break what is normal in that culture, for the sake of your comfort, I would encourage you to maybe, like I said, open your heart a little bit, open your mind. That doesn't mean you have to do it perfectly. Let's be clear. But anyway, travel wise, I'm grateful to say that my first time out of the country proper was very much so in my youth. My parents are from Canada, so first place I ever visited was Canada. But to be fair, that is kind of America adjacent. I did, because I'm a California kid, I did visit Mexico a couple times. But really where it started to change my perspective, I had an opportunity at the age of 16 to go to Germany and Switzerland for a little bit. Man, that was revolutionizing in terms of my worldview. And then, got to see and meet some family there and see things that were just, California, let's be clear, is very new in the world's perspective, right? We've only been around a few hundred years, at least in its current incarnation. But when you're in Europe, for example, the thing that is evidently clear is that everything is thousands of years old. And that there's a weightiness to the atmosphere when you're standing in sort of sacred ground, or visiting a building that had survived hundreds of years, or even more recent history, all worthy, right? So that was very eye-opening to me at 16. As a younger man in my early 20s, I had an opportunity to go to New York for the first time. I will right now tell you, New York is a world unto itself. It is not part of the United States. It's a special place entirely, right? At least it was at the time. But no, I did have an opportunity to travel overseas for work specifically. I've been to China many times. I will say that I've never been to a tier 1 or tier 2 city. So for those who are not familiar with the gradation system in China or Greater China, they themselves rank city. So it is tier 1 would be like a Beijing. I was primarily dealing in what would be like the manufacturing quadrant, which would be Dongguan. Even some of those areas have since changed quite a bit in the time that I initially visited. But again, I've been to China a pretty healthy amount. I also visited Hong Kong several times back when it was still under British occupation. Mm-hmm. I have not been back since China retained control. But yeah, that's a little bit of where I've been in the world, right? Certainly had a wealth of experiences that changed me as a younger person. Certainly many for the better. And yeah, I couldn't be sitting here today unless I was a product of some of those travels.
Have you had a chance to go to Japan?
No. So I have a bucket list. On that bucket list are 2 places I would desperately love to go to Japan. It is the top of my list. Uh-huh. I have been planning a trip for several years at this point and have not been able to go because of the shape of the world. The plan was deferred to this fall. I'm hoping to still go this fall. But right now, Japan is not open to tourism. So we will see. It is likely to be deferred to next year. But that is my number one place I've always wanted to go, ready to go. Put me in, coach, kind of places. Have you been?
I haven't been, but that was one of the questions I came up with, and I'm like, I have to ask him if he's been, because
I desperately want to go. I have been a bit of a Nihongo-phile since, honestly, since I was exposed to Rangers in 1990. Think about this, 93, right? So that really sparked what has become a lifelong obsession with Japan. Mm-hmm. I think that they are, from a pop culture perspective, they are way out ahead of everybody else in terms of the things that they create on the daily. And I think it's also fascinating to know like what their history is and what sort of inspires that in terms of a modern expression, right? Japan today is very different from the Japan of like 75 years ago or 100 years ago. And it's fascinating to constantly learn new things that are infused in the culture and why they express themselves outwardly to the world today in the way that they do. It's really a product of all the things that they've been exposed to, and also their own history. So, but yeah, I'm obsessed. I have to go. I have to get there sooner than later.
Yeah, no, that's one of the places I'd love to go to as well, and also New Zealand. And I believe you've been to New Zealand.
I have been to New Zealand. I'm very grateful to say. So that was kind of like the last days of me being at Hasbro. I was actually on set for Power Rangers Beast Morphers as they were just about to start production on the second season, because they film it back to back. So I was there literally watching them paint Roxy's jumper from yellow to purple, that kind of stuff. I think the day I arrived on set, they were shooting the holiday special, if I'm not mistaken. So yeah, I've been to New Zealand. I will tell you now that it's the North Island and the South Island, if I'm not mistaken. And the North Island is what you see in the picturesque cinematic moments of like Lord of the Rings or whatever, right? It's sort of unclaimed, untamed territory. And then the South Island is right there compressed between Singapore and Australia. And it is a fascinating fusion of cultures and the most wondrous of people. Like, I am obsessed with New Zealanders. They are incredible and very, how do I say this? They are like the most wondrous of hosts, and very lovely and polite. And I don't know, I love New Zealand. I'm fascinated by New Zealand, but yeah, I've been. In fact, if I may, I might have a photo or two if you'd like to see it.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
For sure.
So let me pull this up.
Yeah, I was going to say, if there's anything at this point, I know we talked about Funko and sharing, but if you had anything you wanted to share from prior time or prior experiences that you think is pretty memorable, that would be great.
So this is me and many of the cast. We were mostly all present there that day. But we did hiking while we were, in between shooting days. The cast was very tight. They were lovely, lovely people. They've really gotten to know each other and grown close. And so it was very common for like the cast to go out and do a hike one day, or for Chip to take them out. And I was able to participate in some of that stuff. And honestly, it's some of my most favorite professional memories. Getting to know these people a little bit better and grow closer to them. So that's a shot from the falls. And then I might have, here, 1 second. I know I've got it somewhere. I know it's here, and I know you're going to want to see it. Poops Lagoops, where is it? Oh no. I may have misfiled it somewhere. I created a couple folders in preparation for this, and I thought it would keep me organized, but clearly I'm a mess right now. Oh, here it is. Let me share this screen. So, Beast Morphers is very near and dear to me, and I had an opportunity to actually, be on set and be in the room with the suit actors often. So we shot some stuff in Grid Battle Force's base, and I'd always been a huge fan of Go Buster before it had been adapted for Beast Morphers. So to kind of be in the presence of these guys was a bit surreal, because they are as gorgeous on screen as they are in person, or I should say it in the other way around. They're gorgeous in person to a level of detail that you wouldn't expect, and they operate or work in a way that it is very convincing. I will say that, right? Like when you see some of these characters, same thing with suited Ranger actors in person, it's very convincing. Like you get how and why, certainly Japanese kids, and then ultimately, kids the world over, like the suit is the suit. And so the suit you see in show, if you happen to be so lucky to see it in person, it's just like, it's a very surreal moment. So yeah, a little bit of travel to New Zealand.
That's really cool. That looks awesome. So, lots of really, really cool experiences you've had, which has been a lot of fun to talk about. But one of the other things that we did want to discuss is we saw that, were able to give a TED Talk a few years back as well.
Sure.
And one of the things you talked about is, just geek culture, right? And the fact that it just continues to become more and more, and really has become a mainstream topic at this point. I was curious on your perspective of, because I feel like sometimes this conversation comes up, is do you ever think that we'll get to a point where the market just becomes oversaturated? Like how some people say there's maybe too many superhero movies or shows nowadays. Like, do you think there's a point where there's too much of that? Just wanted to get your perspective on that.
Some people would argue we are there now, right? I don't know if I am one of those people. I totally respect if that's your opinion. I would maybe point, everything old is new again. So what I mean by that is, if you're looking at American television and American broadcasting, Westerns were all the rage for a decade, for good or for bad. But it was what it was, and it was literally the only thing, really from a production standpoint, that was out there for folks to consume. It reached a carrying capacity and a breaking point, and ultimately the market pivoted more towards the space age, if you will, the atomic age, right? I think what's very fascinating now is not so much that we have reached a level of saturation with different genre, because that's very much so the case. Like we have a wealth of superhero stuff today. I think what's very interesting is that we are not obsessed with genre. I think we are obsessed with franchise. And franchise, this idea of like interconnectivity and endlessness, but things count in the context of the story that is being told. That's very interesting, because it feeds people's emotional resonance with this stuff, right? Like Star Wars in the 70s was that movie you went and saw and you obsessed over for 20 years before it was ever a twinkle again in George Lucas's eye doing some of the prequels, right? And that's where things kind of changed, where the industry in whole learned very quickly that it wanted more of more, because people wanted more of more. They wanted to live in these worlds. They wanted to occupy these worlds. They wanted to be thinking about these worlds. They wanted to pass it on to the next generation. So I would argue that we are not in a genre obsessed culture right now. We are in a franchise obsessed culture. And what's very interesting to me is franchises attempting to change the genre constantly in order to keep it interesting. So like a good example of that is, or I should say an easy example of that is, let's look at Thor for a second, right? The first two Thor movies, very quote unquote serious takes on the character, arguably in retrospect, did not work. It was too much of a straight take on the character. It did not have its own personality. It could not stand alone as compared to some of the other things that were going on within Marvel at the time. And I know, Hassan, you're a big Marvel guy, right?
As am I.
Oh, okay, all right. So shared space here. But like Ragnarok broke a lot of things. Ragnarok dared to break a number of rules and took it on sort of this cosmic rock and roll journey that really seemed to intuitively work for the character. And the market suddenly understood that, wait a minute, no. Thor is not a straight gods and demigods kind of story. Thor is a story of gods and demigods occupying a space that is infinitely strange. And because of that strangeness, there are inherent levels of humor baked into their sheer existence, right? So it broke its own genre. It's still a superhero flick, make no mistake, but it dared to be a comedy. But there are many examples of that. Like look at Loki. Like Loki, the television series, is unrecognizable from much of phase 1 through 3, right? Or phase 1 through 2 at least. It is again strange because of the nature of the characters, but it's a crime drama told in a very odd way, and very serious way, right? WandaVision, same thing, right? It's a evolving sitcom through the era until it becomes modern era superhero, stuff. So I think that's what's very interesting to me is like franchises real. I'm a little long-winded here, guys. I'm sorry, but like
No.
franchises attempting to bend towards genre more and more now in an attempt to keep it interesting. And I think you're just going to see more and more of that. Like the Batman is a great example. I'm a huge Batman fan. I have been my whole life, since I could see 66 Batman in syndication on television, right? But like what's so successful about the Batman most recently is that, sure, you could argue it's a take it back to the roots kind of interpretation of the character. I disagree to an extent where I see it more as a genre play. It is absolutely crime noir, right? It is absolutely organized crime. It just so happens that this guy dresses the way that he does and does what he does in the context of the story. But it's a crime drama first and foremost, and important to the character, it's a detective story, right? Which we really haven't seen much of historically with the character, at least from a theatrical perspective. So that's it, right? It's I don't think we're oversaturated right now. I think we're living in a very interesting juxtaposition of franchise bending towards genre.
I have to
just
ask.
said that. I could have saved you 10 minutes. I should have just said that.
Oh no, I loved hearing your take on this. Actually, I do want to ask two questions. First one is, since we're talking about superheroes and stuff, do you have any like favorite superheroes that like you're really into?
Oh yeah, wholeheartedly. I've been a Batman guy, like I said, my whole life. Man, I mean, I've been a DC guy forever, so I'm a Batman, Superman, Wonder Woman, Shazam, Green Lantern kind of guy. Okay. But independent of that, I mean, look, there's sort of like 5 things, I guess, or 6 things that have defined me through my life. And Hassan, as you mentioned earlier, I mentioned them in my TED Talk, right? Which is like Back to the Future, Ghostbusters, DC Comics, Disney. What am I missing? Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and Power Rangers, right? Like there are many superheroes, or at least superhero archetypes in all of that content. But yeah, those things are what shaped me. But if we're talking like straight superheroes, yeah, hardcore DC, Batman, Superman, Wonder Woman, Green Lantern, Shazam. And then if we're talking like Marvel,
yes.
So like I grew up with the X-Men. X-Men was a big deal to me as a kid. That was kind of my lens of the broader Marvel universe. I really didn't become a bigger Marvel fan until the MCU started to really come together. And since then, I would tell you, of course, I loved Wolverine because everybody loved Wolverine. But I think as an adult, I've come to really appreciate that I'm arguably more of a Cyclops than I am a Wolverine. So I really love Cyclops and the character of Scott Summers. But his brother is my favorite mutant, Havoc. So Alex Summers. Independent of those guys, I would say that, I love Captain America. I like Cap is easily the most DC character in Marvel. With sort of these World War II origin roots. And, some would argue a bit of like a, chiseled jaw Americana take. It's very reminiscent of many of the things that make Superman great.
Yep.
So, I'm a big Cap fan these days. I've also really come to love Spider-Man. But here's the thing, growing up, I was a Scarlet Spider guy. Like Peter Parker, nah, man, I'm all about Ben Reilly. Which was kind of like that era of storytelling. These days, though, because of Homecoming, like I've really come to love the character of Spider-Man, of Peter Parker, through the Tom Hiddleston interpretation of the character, right? And I love that they've sort of taken him full circle from, teched out protege of Tony Stark to now starting fresh again and having to rebuild it for himself. I think that's awesome.
Yeah. Awesome. That's really, really cool. I love understanding the why, like you kind of explained of what really interests you or what kind of stands out for you. That's really cool.
Yeah. Personal favorites, gentlemen. What are yours?
Yeah. Do you want to go, Udit?
You go ahead first.
Okay. So I think just growing up, the 90s really shaped a lot for me. So, I mean, general superheroes, I mean, obviously Power Rangers. I mean, I feel like that's
no question
that's
whatsoever.
pretty known. But on the Marvel side, and I would say probably more in the Marvel than DC. Although in DC, I watched the Batman show,
Sure.
Fox Kids, watched the X-Men show, watched Spider-Man, right? So those ones stood out, but especially Spider-Man through the years, and then just fell in love with the MCU and have just been obsessed with everything MCU since then. But also really enjoyed the Batman and the Dark Knight trilogy and those films as well. So I guess those would probably be my. Oh, and then also on the DC side, I have watched much of the Arrowverse shows up until I'm a little behind recently. But I really came to love the Flash.
Sure.
Just a really interesting character, really interesting storylines. So I would say the Flash is another one of my favorites.
Right on.
I'd say for me, so like I mentioned before, I did grow up with He-Man. I spent a majority of my childhood in India, so growing up there, it was a little bit different. But He-Man was, one of my favorites. In terms of Marvel, I think I really like that comedy aspect of things that you're talking about, and I think the Guardians of the Galaxy really bring that. That whole storyline kind of brings that in. So I enjoy that, just like, in terms of, I guess, entertainment and just enjoyment. But I would say the last Spider-Man movie really impressed me. Like I walked in with low expectations, as Hassan knows, because we watched it together, and I came out of it. I was like, yeah, this is fantastic. But in terms of Batman, I was a big fan of the trilogy as well, but I have mixed feelings about the most recent Batman. So
that's okay. Everybody's totally open to their own opinions on it. I do have to ask a follow-up question, right? Because you threw it out there that you grew up in India. So and you were a huge He-Man fan. So is that a product of like, oh, that was available to you where you were growing up? Or was that a product of something else? Like, I'd love to understand how you get exposed to He-Man. Like, where is that connectivity point for you?
Yeah, I mean, the best I can remember is, we had like a mishmash of, I guess American TV shows, and then like these Indian TV shows. So He-Man was just, on one of the channels. Like we had to have like cable TV, which sometimes I had the privilege of having, and the other times I didn't. So, it was off and on for me. But when we did have cable TV, we got a lot of exposure to American entertainment. And He-Man was one of the things that, as a kid, I was just like, wow, this is amazing.
So I will say it in a different way. Sorry, guys. Clearing my throat here. So I mentioned earlier, I'm a big Shazam fan, Captain Marvel. And I guess the more and more I learn about the character, the more and more I become fascinated in the way that creation changed the shape of the world as we know it. So I'm not going to get too far into the diatribe here, but He-Man is a literal riff on Captain Marvel, on Shazam. The only difference is that He-Man uses the conduit of the sword of Grayskull, the power sword, to channel the lightning that ultimately changes him from scrawny Prince Adam to He-Man, right? Yeah. That is exactly the story of Billy Batson and Shazam. The only difference is that there's no sword in between them.
That's right.
I also, for a brief period of time at Playmates, had an opportunity to work with Mark Taylor, I should say, who is arguably the creator of He-Man, or at least today is co-credited as the creator of He-Man. And he grew up on Captain Marvel, Shazam stuff. And it was really just, how do I take that and apply sword and sorcery? And that's what created Masters of the Universe. Hassan, to your point, Marvel Comics is named after Captain Marvel. Not to get too far into the weeds here, but the character, when it premiered, was such a massive hit that it outsold Superman. And at the time, Superman couldn't have that, right? Couldn't have a direct competition like that. They were losing all of their influence and all of their market opportunity. So they embroiled, I think it's Fawcett Comics, in decades worth of litigation in order to challenge the character's right to publication, so that Superman would continue to become the American icon that we now understand him to be. But at the time, it was very much so a neck and neck battle of like, is Superman going to win out, or will Captain Marvel's publication overshadow, right? So the character got embroiled in all of this litigation history for many years. Consequently, it was like in the late 60s that literally on the day that their copyright expired and they did not renew it, they were within days of, I think, of striking distance of renewing the copyright. The company that became Marvel Comics published an ash can to steal the name. And so they changed their name to Marvel Comics, and all the equity that had been built over a half decade around that word, Marvel. They even created their own version of Captain Marvel, which again, kind of commandeered all of that goodwill, all of that like that understanding in the culture. And so today you think Captain Marvel, you're like, oh yeah, it's Linda Danvers, MCU. Marvel Comics has been Marvel Comics since the Submariner and the Human Torch fought. That is not the case. It's just interesting to see how history played out in that way. Sorry, bit of a Shazam file here as well.
No, that's really cool. Like you said, like it's interesting to see how things have evolved over the years, and different characters and companies have really influenced each other over the years. And I think this ties into actually another question we had, where our last episode was all about the concept of storytelling from various perspectives of different mediums that stories can be told, whether oral, print, virtual, digital ways, the metaverse, right? Different ways of doing that, and different types of stories as well. But I'm curious on your perspective of where do you think the future of storytelling looks like? Like either the influences, or what does the future of storytelling look like to you?
Good question. I'm going to attempt to chip away at an answer. There is no one straight answer here. The one thing I will say is it has to continue to be different. So like, let's be real, fellas. We live in a real world that is a product of thousands of years of cultural history, a real world that is a product of entire industries that were invented. And to your point from earlier, like how those different expressions of story, found their way across the globe and shaped your experiences and mine as well, right? But I think we're living through a very interesting time, a very critical time, where we are deviating from, there's no other way to say this, from like, from a white male dominant protagonist culture, right? Like the wealth of history that Hollywood has under its belt, so much of it is from a white male presence or a white male perspective. And so that's influenced the creations in turn, right? That has to change, that had to change. And so that's part of what we're living through right now, where the diversity of faces in front of the screen and behind the screen are changing the nature of story because they have to. I think it's equally powerful when you're talking about franchise, because something that's been very prevalent in DC Comics for many years is the idea of legacies, right? Like you have the Bat family, you have the Superman family, but they also have this idea of like, okay, well, yeah, some guy was Blue Beetle 50 years ago in canon, but today he's a Latino kid, right? And it's an entirely different expression of the character, but still fundamentally Blue Beetle, and recognizably as a legacy, he is Blue Beetle, right? I think if you're asking like, what's the future of storytelling? I think that's the first place where you start, is you introduce more voices into the people that are making these things. You have to, not only to keep these things alive and to keep them interesting, but because everybody needs a seat at the table. Everybody needs to be able to see themselves in the adventure, regardless of what the shape of that adventure is. If it's a rom-com, great. If it's an action comedy, great. If it's a superhero flick, great. Like, I think we need to tear down the paradigm that has sort of self-perpetuated over the last 60, 70 years of motion entertainment, right? So that's important. And that's kind of, we're living a little bit through that moment right now. And it is so encouraging and equally heartbreaking, so encouraging because it keeps the story infinitely interesting, and it keeps these things that you love fresh, and it injects new blood into it. Heartbreaking because, people can't look past their own stupidity and their own biases. And there are many people who are unwilling or too lazy to do so. And so it creates this like very strange discourse of like, this is where we're going. This is where we need to go. This is where the biggest possible new audiences are. And then you have all the naysayers or straight up, literally professional hating variety that are trying to keep these things regressed. It'll never happen, right? But having to process all that grief is a whole bunch of shit. I don't know if I can swear on this. I'm so sorry. You may have to bleep me out, right?
No, that's fine.
But as somebody who follows these things very closely, as somebody who is invested emotionally, we see this played out over and over and over again right now, especially as we're living through things like Phase 4 or new interpretations on Star Wars. Or we're seeing it again this week with the Tolkien trailer, right? For all the new Rings of Power stuff. The sheer existence, if I should probably phrase that in terms of question. I know I'm getting big here, I'm sorry, but it's very important, right? Like, if your notion is that these spaces cannot be occupied by the actual people that occupy our world, then you are just straight up racist, right? And you are closed-minded to the storytelling potential of the future. If you want to be force-fed the same flavor of stupid nothing, watch the movies that you want to watch that exist in today, period, right? But we got to move on. We got to focus on cooler, bigger stories, newer voices, right? And this is one of the things that I absolutely love about Phase 4 for Marvel is they're playing with the idea of legacy, right? Like Captain America transferred the shield formally to Sam Wilson, right? Sam Wilson is Captain America. I don't know why the internet felt like it had to have that conversation last week of who's Captain America? That's some BS, right? Let's be real. That's some inherent racism that's being expressed because it's convenient, or the whole point is discourse. I don't care. But there is something fundamentally so cool and so interesting to me about the idea of Sam Wilson, Captain America, and some of the stuff that they were getting into in the Isaiah Bradley storyline, anyway. So, or Kamala Khan, as we just saw in Ms. Marvel wrapping up last week, effing cool. And I'm assuming, I don't want to spoil anything. Have either of you seen it? Have you been watching? You have to speak.
Oh yeah,
we both watched it. Yeah.
So I'm going to kind of throw out a general spoiler warning to anybody else that's stream watching right now. But I think it's so cool and so smart on that tiny little change that they made between Kamala being inhuman and ultimately a mutant, right? I think that's so cool and so smart for a multitude of reasons, not the least of which is all of the stupid naysayers that were this show isn't for me. I can't find myself in this show. Whatever neckbeard BS that you want to throw out there, they have just now made this character the linchpin into the next 2 decades of storytelling. And if you wanted to know where it happened first and where they said it first, it was here, right? In a brown girl from Jersey. Sorry, we're moving on, right? We got cool shit to talk about. And so that to me is I'm so excited about that. That to me is the future of storytelling, is it has to come from different voices. It has to show different faces. And that stuff has to become so tacit that we never have to have this conversation again, right? It's one of the things that I absolutely loved most about being it is one of the things that I absolutely love most about being a Power Rangers fan, and having had the privilege of working on Power Rangers for a time, is like, that was never a question, right? Day one, 6 kids, different backgrounds, different faces, did not matter, right? It wasn't even part of the conversation. In fact, each kid was, to an extent, like celebrated for their individual diversity or their background, right? And we didn't, it wasn't being force fed to us. We didn't have to think about it. It just was. And that is the tradition that the show has carried for 28 years now, right? That to me is so important, because all of us on this call, we are the kids who just grew up with that stuff, right? And I think about the multitude of kids that just grew up with that stuff, right? And the many multitudes of generations that will just grow up with phase 4 like it was always there, right? Like, that to me is the future, because those are the stories that need to be told, and they need to be told from the people that are telling them. You know, like the 2 dudes that just did Ms. Marvel, they nailed it, right? They totally nailed it, and they're doing Batgirl next year, and I'm freaking out, because if Batgirl is going to be anything like Ms. Marvel, sold, like all day, every day, sold, right? So that to me is the future, right? Like, we'll always find a new way of like telling the story, a new medium of telling the story. We'll find new ways to connect interactive to the floppy in your hand to what you're watching on TV. That's cool and interesting. But to me, it's more about like who's in the story and who's telling the story. That's the future. Another 10 minutes. I should have just said that.
No, that I genuinely, I'm not gonna lie. Towards the end, because I was thinking about Miss Marvel as well too, and I'm just like kind of getting a little teary eyed, because I felt like during Miss Marvel by the end as well, like just thinking about like my son growing up, and like he'll have that, you know, as a core part of the media, right? Whereas growing up, we may not have had as much of that representation. Yeah. And that's just a really, really cool thing to see. So like you said, just having like more voices represented is super important. I mean, that's awesome. Yeah.
And he won't even think about it. And that's the part that makes me happy.
Yeah.
Won't even think about it. It'll just be how it is, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Well said. Well said. Do you want to take the next one, Newton?
Yeah, so I mean, it's kind of going off on a tangent a little bit, but
sorry.
No, it's okay. I mean, I really enjoyed hearing what you have to say, and honestly, like, it's just, you seem like a very, like, you have a lot of depth of knowledge in terms of, you know, storytelling in these areas. So it's been fascinating. So thank you for sharing. What would you say is something that inspires you, and like, what are you passionate about? You know, what drives you to do what you do?
You know, I don't know if it's coming across here, but like, I just genuinely love these things. You know, like,
it's coming across.
Yeah. You know, I feel like these things have given me so much, and equally and in turn, I have a degree of a responsibility to help these things continue to give as much to other folks that are out there. You know, I love franchise stuff. I love these characters with all my heart. They've been there for me for the ups and downs, and I can mark major moments in my life around being able to do some of these things, or even just like, you know, I remember the storyline that I was reading in college in the dining hall, you know, and like desperately waiting week to week to catch that next issue. So that's kind of what gets me out of bed every morning. There's also the surprise and delight thing of just what I do, where there's always going to be a new challenge. We always want to go after something new. We do a lot of social listening. So getting to be a part of that, you know, that's very exciting too. And then in my own work, like, excuse me, Funko hat off for a second, Jason hat on, like, as I jam and write my own things, you know, it's writing the things that I don't think I've seen yet, you know, or the things that, or the things I want to see more of in the future, right? That's it. That's kind of what drives me.
Okay.
Nice. Do you want to do that other question, or should we just get to the kind of our remaining our fun little what ifs?
Yeah, let's get to the what ifs.
Okay. So maybe I'll ask the first one if you want to ask the second one.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So we basically we like to throw in these like little just fun questions towards the end. So obviously, you know, one of the ways that we've been able to connect over the years is playing Fortnite. And Fortnite is known for its vast array of designs and skins that are available, many of which are collabs, but also a lot of original designs. So if you had the opportunity to create an original Fortnite skin, what would it be like?
Oh no, I was not ready for a question like that. That's not fair. Because I take these things so seriously. Oh man, that's tricky. That's real tricky. You know, I will say I'm really loving the like the tune interpretations, like the you know, sort of the classic tune. I'm trying to remember what it's called. It's the Cuphead aesthetic. It's like Spring Heel, but it's not. Oil Can. I think it's called Oil Can, right? So like, I'm really obsessed with what they've done there. I'd love to see that continue. I really love tune musicals. Oh man. So I guess an oil can something, but I'd have to think of the character, right? I don't know what the right one would be. It would definitely be an existing character in Fortnite or something in the oil can aesthetic, I think.
Yeah. Or is there, you know, maybe this might be a little easier, but like a dream collab then that you'd like Fortnite to do?
Yeah, I sort of expressed as much today. I'd love to see the DC stuff continue. I want to see more DC stuff. There are many heroes and characters I'd love to see interpreted there. But in terms of like collabs we have not yet seen, I mean, honestly, Marty 2015 would be pretty rad with a hoverboard back bling. That'd be very cool. I would love to see Rangers, of course, no question whatsoever. Turtles, you know, see Slash. Like I love like the antithetical characters. So, you know, Slash is a playable character in game. I don't know. I'd say that. Let's say that.
Nice.
Okay. And I guess my question is, if you could, and I think we touched on this a little bit, like in terms of your favorites, but if you could be in a movie, which movie would you want to be in, and why?
I would not want to be in the movie. I would want to make the movie.
Okay.
Batman Beyond. Full stop.
I knew it was going to be something related to Batman. I knew it.
Yeah. So Batman Beyond is maybe my most favorite anything ever. It kind of marries my two favorite things from my childhood. Like I was a big futurist as a kid because of Back to the Future 2, and Batman, and it married those things into this hybrid of wonder. So it would be a Batman Beyond flick, or series of flicks, no question.
Have you had a chance to work on any films?
Yes. No comment.
I think this is delving into some of the top.
No, I mean,
stuff.
I've definitely worked on some theatricals. We'll just kind of.
So, I mean, you had a hand a little bit. I don't know maybe to what extent, but the 2017 Power Rangers movie, right? Can you say?
Yeah, I mean, like I came into that pretty late. To be fair, like the script was baked and stuff. We were still finalizing some of the minor things here and there, and let's be real, like Saban only had so much of a voice against, you know, the Wedas and the Lionsgates of the world, and the director Dean Israelite, if I recall correctly. But we tried to make our things, or we tried to plant our seeds, or we tried to change the sequencing a little bit. We did what we could, right? I would argue that I've had way more wealth working on the TV side of things than theatrical today.
Gotcha. Cool. Well, man, this has been really, really interesting conversation. I love just getting to geek out and dive into all this stuff as well. And those last questions make me want to hop into some Fortnite again soon. So we'll definitely
Let's do it. I'll be around tomorrow. Let's do it.
Nice. Yeah, we actually, Una and I actually tossed around the idea of maybe even like, because we live stream this podcast, maybe even one day doing like a Fortnite like live stream or something, and just like answering questions that people have in the chat and hanging out, that sort of thing. I don't know if you'd be up for joining for something like that as well.
All day, every day. But I will warn you in advance, as you have experienced over and over again with me, I am a great solo player. I'm an only okay team player in Fortnite. I honestly need to polish those skills quite a bit.
Oh, no worries.
Okay. I'm terrible either way, but I do my best.
Well, as we start to kind of wrap things up, is there anything that you want to promote, or maybe give out any social media for folks to check out what you're up to?
No. I look, I just want to say it plain. Like, I really appreciate the opportunity to hang out with you guys. This is always a treasure trove of time. And no, it's really, I don't know. I'm humbled that you would invite me on as a guest. Nothing really to promote at this time. I mean, if you want, you can catch me on Instagram and Twitter at Shadowpiper. But independent of that, I think you should follow these two gentlemen because they've got more to say. So no, thanks guys. This has been cool.
Couldn't agree more. It's been fantastic. And it's been great meeting you. And I look forward to playing Fortnite with you sometime.
Let's do it. I'm ready.
Awesome. Yeah. Thanks so much, Jason, for joining us. It's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, my pleasure. My pleasure.
And thank you to everybody as well. Please let us know in the comments if you get a chance to watch this later as well. Let us know your thoughts and message us via social media. So we're on Twitter at the Dose of Desi, and you can email us at thedoseofdesipod@gmail.com.
Rad. Same thing goes. If you have any questions kind of outstanding coming out of today's conversation, just hit me up on social. I'm happy to still address it after the fact.
Fantastic. Thanks again, Jason. And once again, keep an eye on our social media for any polls or episode notifications. If you have any ideas and that you'd like to share, or any ideas in terms of what you'd like us to do, please do share. I guess that wraps things up for today. I really enjoyed the conversation. Once again, thanks, Jason. Thanks, Hassan. Take care and see you next time.
Bye, guys. Thanks.
Bye.
See ya.